Hi, Peter Kennedy here from pkys, and I'm here today with Dave Martin, and we're going to take a look at Node-RED on the Victron Cerbo GX. So Node-RED is an additional programming tool that's built into the Cerbo, but it's not enabled by default. You have to turn it on, and Dave here is the expert. I'm going to turn it over to him.
Hey guys, so today we're just going to kind of get into Node-RED, some basic functionality you can do just at home with no additional gear, assuming you have kind of the basic prereqs in your setup. So getting through some of those, like Peter said, Node-RED is a flow-based programming tool that was initially made at IBM and now is part of the Node.js Foundation. So it's a very mature tool, a lot of development going on. And it's very cool that Victron took the time to get this integrated into their products. It really opens the door to kind of the rest of the Internet of Things world, including some of the industrial applications that can come from it. Makes integration with a lot of other products very, very easy. What Node-RED is not is a Victron product. It's just something that they've taken from the outside world and integrated into the Cerbo. They've done a lot of work on the back end to make this really easy to set up, really easy to integrate, which is very cool. The one thing that's a little bit limited on that front is they're not going to go out and do a bunch of support tickets for it. Support is from guys like Peter, the greater community at large. Make sure to check out modifications community on Victron Connect. And the main thing is that you have some gear to run this stuff on. So your kind of prerequisite would be a GX device, preferably one of the newer ones. Some of the older stuff, like a Color Control GX and a Venus GX, are a little bit limited on processing power and RAM. So once you kind of get into some of this more advanced stuff, you could definitely notice a major slowing down of that gear. So stick with some of the newer stuff. Cerbo, Cerbo S, any of the brand new Cerbo products are going to do really well, and any of the GX enabled inverters will do well as well.
So Dave, there are some help files on the Victron site. If you go and go on to Victron Professional or even Google on YouTube, there is a 3-part webinar series on how to set up Node-RED, but we found that it's a bit too advanced for the beginner, and I'm certainly a beginner at this. And so we're going to try and start you with Node-RED 101.
Yeah. So now we're going to briefly go over getting everything going on your GX device. In this example, we're going to go ahead and just go through a Touch 50. This can also be done via VRM or any of the Victron Touch displays. Installation's pretty straightforward. 2 things need to happen. We need to enable the larger version of Venus OS, download that firmware, and then we can come back and enable the feature set we're after, which in this case is Node-RED. One thing you're going to need to make sure is that you're already at version 2.9 or higher. If you're not, go ahead and just do a standard software update. We're going to show you where that stuff is right now. Getting into the software update, we can go in, we can go to settings, and we go to firmware here. And from there, we're going to jump into online updates. We can check for updates, and it will go out to the internet and tell us what's going on. So no newer firmware update is available. That tells me that this is currently up to date. But if we go in and change our image type to large, that will give us a few more options here. Let's check for updates one more time, the large. So we have an update available. We can press to update, and that's going to install version 3.01 for us. Fix it in post. Online updates. There we go. So it'll go through the paces. It's going to download the update and do a restart. So we're going to wait for that.
So is that an update to the regular firmware, or is that an update to the large?
We changed it to large,
Yeah.
and then asked for it.
Okay.
Let's see. All right, so our unit just finished updating. So let's go in and check that we got what we needed from the update. If we go into our menu and settings, we should have a new one all the way at the bottom. So we'll scroll all the way down. And now we have Venus OS Large Features. If we pop into that submenu, we can see we've got Signal K and Node Red. So if we enable Node Red and hit OK, now that server's running and we can jump on our computer or go through VRM to access the Node Red. Alright, so now that we have everything enabled on the Cerbo, we can go ahead and switch to the laptop and pull up Node Red. So Node Red is accessible from the Venus local address, similar to how you get into the local remote console. What we're going to do is make sure we use HTTPS. That way it'll load correctly, and go ahead and go to the address. So what's going to load here is your Node-RED workspace. In here you've got your work area in the middle. You've got context menu on the side, which can give you both information about the flow you're working with. You can get to help there and other settings. And then you've got all your palettes down the left-hand side. Now, over here on the left-hand side, this is where we get all of our building blocks to build flows from. And in here, if you scroll way down, all the blocks turn a familiar shade of blue, and we see a lot of Victron icons and a lot of different blocks for doing different things. There is great documentation on this, both on the Victron page for the Venus OS large features and on the Victron GitHub, which we will link for you guys later. To get started though, we're gonna kind of do some basic functionality with the Cerbo using the inbuilt relay that's in there. Getting in there and working with it, we're gonna do it in two parts. One, just kind of a direct flow, and we're gonna get some interaction from here to the Cerbo, and then we'll go ahead and build a web dashboard with a switch on it a little bit later on. But let's start with the basics first. First, we're gonna grab one of the inject nodes and bring that into our workspace. Now what the inject does is it's able to, on the click of this little button here on the left hand side, it will actually inject whatever you tell it to. In this case, the default setup for timestamp. It's not really going to do much for us when controlling a relay, so we'll go ahead and go into the edit node. That's going to bring up our submenu here, and we can see two different line items here. One is message payload. And if we go in here to that drop down, we're able to change what it can send. Those of you with some programming experience will start seeing some very familiar stuff. In our case, we just want to be able to send a 0 or a 1 to turn it on and off. So let's go ahead and change to number. And we'll set that to 0 and hit done. That'll give us an inject node here with 0 in it. So we have our off, let's do our on. So we're going to do another inject node and do the same thing, but set our number, in this case, to 1. So next up, we want to be able to send these to the Cerbo. We want to talk to it. So we can go down and grab a Victron node. In this case, kind of the flow of things gets pretty clear in the UI here of where these little connecting dots are on the right-hand side. That is data coming out of the system. So we want data going in. We can see when they're on the left-hand side. If we scroll down, we can grab relay control down here and bring that into our workspace. Now, there's something going on with this node that we saw that wasn't going on with the inject nodes, and that's this little red caret here. What that tells us is the node hasn't been configured at all yet. If we go in to the edit, we can see it's not really populated here, but it already has identified a Venus device, so it can see the Cerbo and it's auto-populated it here. So if we go to our measurement submenu under here, we can see we've got relay 1 and relay 2, and those correspond to the relays on the bottom of the servo. So if we grab our relay 2 state, we can see our open and closed values here are 0 and 1. So that hopefully makes more sense on what we were doing with the inject. And then we can go ahead and give it a label just to make things a little clearer. So we'll call this GX relay 2. And that'll just kind of keep things clear for us. You can name it whatever you want, especially the function that you're using it for. It helps when your workspace here gets really busy. It's easy to identify things, and could help another user who's coming in to use the system in the future. So we're done configuring that. Our little red caret went away, and now we can start to connect the dots. Doing that's pretty straightforward. If I grab it and drop it anywhere on the node, it'll connect it for me. So we're going to connect our 0 and our 1 here. And all that's saying is we're moving the flow from left to right in this case. Now that we've got this done, we can see we still got all these little blue dots here. That just means it hasn't been deployed, or we haven't saved our changes. So up here in the right hand corner, we can go ahead and hit deploy. So now that we have our flow set up, there is one other step we need to take here, and that is on the servo itself, we need to allow Node-RED to control that relay. The two inbuilt relays have default functions that are defined when you first boot the device up. So we need to go in to the settings for the relay and change it. In this case, we're using relay 2 because relay 1 is often configured as a generator start-stop. So if we go, I'm going to go through the remote console here. You could do this via your touch device or via VRM as well. We're going to go into settings and scroll all the way down to relay. We can go into here, and both are already set to manual, but this is where you would change it. Right here on function, often it's set for temperature, so you want to go in and change it to manual yourself. Now that we have our relay configured on the servo for manual control, we can take control here via the workspace just using our inject nodes here. If we click the little inject button on the left hand side, we're able to trigger the relay and you get a response from the system that it successfully injected the 0 or the 1. Behind me we can hear the relay clicking, and we also have some LEDs set up on that servo just to show you the relay state. Alright, so now that we have control here, that's great, but not very useful having to go into the Node-RED workspace every time we want to do anything with the system. So what we're going to do is set up Node-RED Dashboard, which is commonly used as a web interface to Node-RED, and allow you to get information from the system, create some graphs, do some switches and things like that, and that's what we're doing in our example today. We're going to add a switch to do the same thing that the inject modules are doing. Now the switch is kind of twofold because the relay can be interacted with from multiple parts in the system. I can go to the touchscreen here, I can go to VRM and do it through the remote console, so we need the switch to follow the state of the relay. So like I said, this is an input node. We're actually going to use an output node so that our switch always tracks the state of the relay no matter where it was triggered. So to do that, we're going to come back down to the Victron section of our nodes, and we're going to grab the one that's called relay, and we can see that it's our information is going to flow out of that node. It's going to get it from the system rather than send it to the system. We dropped it in, we can see it's not configured, so let's go in, make sure we grab our relay 2 state, and we'll call this relay 2 state. And complete that. So now we need to grab a switch. Now the dashboard and the switch are not installed by default, so we have to go add that palette to Node-RED. There are a number of palettes available, a lot of extensibility for the system. For those easily distracted, you could search around quite a bit and find a lot of very cool stuff out there in the world. But let's go ahead and work as though we're going to add it. In this case, it's already been added to this system. So we'll go ahead and search for dashboard. And the one we want in this case is node-red-dashboard. And that one's the most maintained and the broadest used. We can see that its last update was a month ago. You can install that by clicking here. It'll work in the background, install it, and let you know when it's done. So in our case, we want to grab a switch.
So can I just interrupt you there, Dave, to say that when you install the dashboard, it installs this palette of blue things here, so that they weren't there before we installed the dashboard.
Yeah, in a fresh system, none of this stuff is going to be in here. And you'll see some very familiar items in there: switch, slider, drop down. And this is where all your basic I/O control would come from the dashboard. In our case, we got a relay on off. Switch makes an obvious choice, so we'll go ahead and grab the switch. In our example here, we can see we're using zeros and ones. When we go in to configure the switch, we can see our on and off payloads are Boolean, in this case a true-false. So for us, we want to make that functionality use the 0 and 1s. That's going to keep it native to kind of the Victron values of on and off. Going in through here, a few of the main things you're going to have to do when it first gets installed is configure a group and a tab for it. And groups and tabs is how the dashboard organizes from left to right, and also has tabs for you to display different screens and really be able to customize everything. To get that going, you need to click the pencil here and name your group. In this case, it's already done, but set up your group, set up your tab. You can call them whatever you want, especially depending on what you're trying to do. It's very easy to keep things organized. So if you're looking at system status, state of charge, temperature, things like that on one page, then you could have controls on another page. Really, sky's the limit for you. In this case, let's go ahead and change our on and off payload to our familiar number type. And our on payload is 1, our off payload is 0. Once we have everything configured here, we can go ahead and hit done. We can see our little red caret went away, and all we have to do in this case is connect our dots. So we want the relay state to feed the switch so that it'll track what's going on, and then we want the switch output to actually change the state of the relay if we actuate it on the page. So once we're done here, we can go ahead and click deploy and open our dashboard. One of the easiest ways to get there is through the UI itself. If you come over here to this drop down in our contextual menu on the right hand side, go to dashboard, and then just pop it out, and it'll open it in a new tab for you here. So our system populated with the way we named it. So we've got our tab and our group here, tab being home, the group being pkys dashboard. And in here, we can trigger the relay just by toggling the switch. So we can hear the relay clicking behind us and see the lights going back and forth. Alright, so picking it back up. Now that we have control of our relay here, the sky's kind of the limit as far as what you want to do with the system. There's a lot of different nodes that allow access to a lot of different pieces of Victron gear, and there's a lot to learn and a lot of information to get out there. Some of the best places to start are a page from the Victron site. It's documentation about the GX product range, and it specifically runs down using Signal K, which is another fun visualization platform, and Node-RED, which in our case, it has a ton of information on Node-RED available, including where to get a little bit more info on the different nodes, what they do, and what a lot of people with a little bit of software development background would be looking for in the documentation. So what are all the different variables that can go in, what can you get out, what are the data types going in, what are the data types coming out. That information is available there, and another good resource is the GitHub page for Node-RED. This has a lot of information about the different nodes, and a great wiki page available from this tab here that can give you access to the videos we mentioned, what the nodes are, and a lot of great example flows. With common tasks, turning inverters on and off based on solar, and dealing with demands in an energy storage system, things like that.
So I followed Dave's instructions with some difficulty the first time, and with a bit less difficulty the second time, and by the third and fourth time I think I nailed it. And then I started playing around this morning, and because this system doesn't have a whole lot of things connected to it, the one thing that was connected was the Ruby sensor, which does temperature, humidity, pressure, and I was able to get quite far with it without even reading the instructions, because of course why would you want to do that? But I just played around and I really got quite far, and I got pretty psyched about some of the things that you can do with it. So I mean, where we came to become really interested in this is its functionality for more advanced systems. So for example, it's built into the system where you can look up the weather forecast and see what the sun is going to be doing tomorrow, and decide if you're going to charge your batteries from the grid today, or if you're going to wait till tomorrow for the sun, and make an automatic routine that does that for you. So it has great applications in industrial use and all kinds of things. I mean, I don't think it's something that you want to use in your camper van or in your boat unless you just are a total geek and like playing with this stuff. But for the power user, it's definitely a great tool.
Well said.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. We're going to include a lot of notes and a written blog post about how to go about this and what we did today.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Dave. That's great.
Thank you.